Hello. Welcome to the video. I'm Alyssa. I write books. Welcome to a casual little chit chat. This will sort of operate like a podcast, so don't feel the need to look at the screen. I'm just going to be knitting here while we chat. I watch a lot of podcasts. Like, this is my kind of preferred content to watch. And this is not a podcast, but it sort of is. I was recently thinking about how I can do more videos. And by more, I mean like consistently have 2 videos a week because I really like having that flow. It keeps me connected to YouTube and to you guys. I know I love it when people I watch post 2 times a week, more content. Love that. But I also like having really long, juicy vlogs. So I was trying to figure out how can I do both, because if I film for half the week, like it's only going to be half hour of a vlog, which is fine, which is like still a decent sized video, to be honest. But I love like a 50-minuter. But then like those also take a long time to edit. So doing that twice a week is kind of a lot. And so I was kind of thinking about like, what are people coming to Alyssa and the books for? You know, I think it's probably a variety of things. Feel free to comment and let me know what you're here for. But I think, yes, I have B-roll and like, yes, it's nice to keep up with what people are doing in their projects, but also I feel like people are just here for the chats, you know? Because I'm posting a 40-minute video and 30 minutes of it is me talking about literally who knows what. I have a few different, we'll call them segments. Really, this is just a time, like I'm going to talk about different things. I'm going to talk about different topics, but also just talking about things that are going on in the authortube community, maybe the larger writing community. Not really commentary by any means, but just like my tips, my tricks, all of my secrets, you know, all those things that you love to see. I feel like we're very chill here in authortube. Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes people get a little crazy, but most of the time, like the bigger things going on in like on threads and on Twitter, like don't really make it to authortube because frankly it's stressful. And I'm really glad actually that we don't get a lot of like drama and big controversies and like people being angry about things all the time on authortube, because like that's the space I prefer to be in. I think the authortube is really focused on actually writing, whereas a lot of other social medias like Threads and Blue Sky and Twitter and all those things, it feels like it's focused on like, I want to talk about me and like all the problems I'm having and all of the ways that the world is wrong and all of the ways that this writer is bad or good, and I think that there's like I'm glad that those spaces exist for those kind of conversations, but also I want to write and I want to hear people talk about like actually writing. And I feel like that is what authortube is because it's longer and you can see it, you know, it's a lot more of people actually making progress on their books and like working towards common goals rather than just like tittering on about like some Instagram DM. Like, what does that have to do with anything? If Charles Dickens could see us now. But anyway, that being said, I want to kind of like not necessarily do like, oh, here's what they're talking about on Twitter. Like let me weigh in, but kind of bringing some of those subjects in to talk about different themes and topics that are going on in the author realm and just like in writing in general. I might throw in some unpopular opinions because I love an unpopular opinion. I have a lot of them. I've been writing for a while. I got a lot of bad opinions. Not bad, good. Good opinions on that a lot of people don't agree with. So the first thing I actually want to talk about is probably the title and thumbnail of this video. So we're getting there, okay? Is if you haven't seen Ali Hazelwood, author of many STEM rom-coms, is kind of where she got her big break, like The Love Hypothesis and Love Theoretically and Love on the Brain. Those were like math, like we love math and we are STEM and we are in love with a hot man who looks like Adam Driver. You know, like that's the book she writes. She's kind of ventured recently. She's wrote a like paranormal romance that's like in the Omegaverse, and she is like a very present author on social media. Like she's always using her platform to really lift other people up. And recently she actually deleted her Instagram because she put in an Instagram, you're not even going to believe this, an Instagram story. She said she was Team Gale. And she was bullied off of her own platform. And don't get me wrong, I am Team PETA. I am. But PETA would not stand for this. Are you kidding? No. And then this is what I dislike about the internet sometimes, is that people took like a silly, like, oh, we're on a panel, like we should have a Team PETA, Team Gale panel. And Allie was like, I'm Team Gale. It went from like a funny little lighthearted, let's talk about a fun book, to you're a terrible person. You have horrible values. I'll never read anything by you again. Like private messaging her, bullying her to the point where she's no longer on social media. What are we doing? Frankly. And I'm sure we all agree about that. But I thought it kind of brought about this bigger conversation of like, what is an artist's or an author's role on social media? Because like, obviously we're in the digital age, and I follow people like Victoria Aveyard and Abby Jimenez and Sabah Tahir who are active on social media in a way that like helps me keep up with their writing and their books. And like, I'm an author. I mean, like, am I an author? Did we decide this? Are you an author if you haven't published anything? I don't think so. Fight about that if you want. We can get into that in another episode if you want. It's just semantics. And I think technically I have published short stories and stuff, so you could call me an author. But anyway, I'm on social media documenting my process, and a lot of people are on Instagram and Threads, like documenting their writer progress. So like, obviously writers are on social media, and I actually think that's good and fine. Like, I don't have this opinion that like, I should just be able to write a book in my house all day and not have to look on social media. Like, I get that this is the world that we're in right now. Like, in the similar way of like, maybe 10 years ago, it was more about like getting on a talk show and being interviewed. Now, the equivalent of that these days is like having a social media presence and getting across things that way. So I'm like, I get that there's going to be an expectation to be on social media as an author, but like, the stuff going on Threads it's just like a minefield. Like, what are we doing? I don't even spend very much time on there, but it made me think about like what should the relationship be between a reader and a writer? Like, that's what it really got me thinking about, because it's easy to think of like Abby Jimenez and Allie Hazelwood and Suzanne Collins as these like really big authors who seem very separate from their fan base because of how like popular and widespread their books are. But we're also in a space right now where there's a like author Threads or writer, author Twitter, author Blue Sky, like people who are maybe more mid-list or who are just getting started are very active in like building their own readership, which I think is new. Like, typically it wasn't your responsibility to build your readership, and now that it's sort of becoming like, that's becoming more prevalent of like, I should get people to read my book. Like, a lot of indie authors have like built their own readership through like social media, and I mean, honestly, like trad pub authors too. This is not really a self-pub, trad pub issue. It's just interesting because it's like, okay, you're opening yourself up to a lot more like direct criticism, and where you're going from like, instead of being sort of separate from the readers, you're like friends with them and you brought them on board, which I think like there's something cool about that. Like, I think about Sarah Cannon over on Heartbreathings, and she like has a very connected fan base who she like talks to, like has a membership for them where she like shares content for them, and like has like, she has coffee chats, which a lot of people in those audiences are writers, but also a lot of them are people who are fans of her books who she just like has a great community with. And I just think that's so interesting, and it's kind of a new landscape that we're navigating because this was never really the case before in history. Who would have thought, even like 20 years ago. I think that because it's kind of a newer landscape, it's hard to figure out like, what is the etiquette? And I think it brings this conversation of, should writers review books? Should readers tag authors? And like, I think it's kind of a general rule that if you're having a negative review of a book, you shouldn't tag the author. I am also of the opinion that, this is going to be a hot take. Are you ready for one of my spicy opinions? I think that authors who are actively promoting their own books should not be overly critical of other books. Here's what I mean by that. Like, I think that obviously I talk about what I read, and I talk about if I like it or not, and I like chat about like what I'm enjoying and what maybe like an element of a book I didn't like. But I think that when an author steps really fully into a reader space, it's not that they can't do that. It actually could create space for them to be bitten in the butt again, because then if people are coming to them for like book reviews and then they publish a book, then it's like, okay, they were just poo-pooing on someone else's book and now I'm reading this book. And it gives readers this sense of like, oh, I can criticize you really harshly because you've talked yourself up so much, even if that's not the intention of the reviewer. Like, I think an interesting example of this is Christina Riccio? Don't know. Poland Banana Books. She was like a huge book. And I'm not out here criticizing her because that would make me a hypocrite. She like got her fame, you'll put in quotation marks, from reviewing books. Like, she was a huge booktuber, like one of the original people. And she would make writing vlog content as well. But like the bread and butter was like deep diving. And often it was very positive, her reviews of books. But she got to a point where she was like running panels with Sarah J. Maas. Like, she was out here doing the work as a book reviewer. And then when her book came out, I remember there being a lot of criticism, and it wasn't really of the book itself. It was more so of like, you presented yourself as this person, as this expert on books, it's hard to separate that. Like, people are bringing that knowledge into their reviews. They're like, oh, well, you've talked about how books have good pacing or bad pacing. Now I feel a lot more like I can critique your pacing a lot more. And so if an author, actually, okay, I shouldn't have even said they shouldn't be in the same space, but if an author is going to step into the book review space, I think it's just like a little more, you're inviting in a lot more harsh criticism than maybe you would have. If Colleen Hoover, I know this is a controversial example, but I'm going to pick her. If Colleen Hoover was out here making like extensive book review videos, I feel like people would think that was inappropriate. And maybe if she's making like, here's my favorite books, like a great time, that's one thing. But like, here's an in-depth, like, I don't like this book, let me tell you all the reasons why, when you yourself are an author, I don't know, it feels a little like you're crossing enemy lines. I feel like there are reader spaces, and readers also get angry sometimes when writers cross into reader spaces. Like, there was all this drama when like people tag authors in their 1-star reviews, and then the author will maybe message them and say, hey, please don't tag me in this. And then that person, this happened recently too, I don't remember who it was, but that person like makes this whole like, this author was so rude to me and DM'd me and told me I couldn't review the book. And really it was like, no, you tagged this author in a critical review and then you expected them to like not see it. These are all examples. Like, there's no black and white. There's no wrong and right way to exist in the reader-writer space, because often it is the same. I don't know. I think it's an interesting conundrum we found ourselves in as writers in this new digital age, because A, we're responsible for building our readership, but then it's like they also, by inviting them in such an intimate level and way, you're also kind of inviting them into your life. And this is not a conversation about like, I'm not really talking about like finding out about a certain view of an author and deciding not to read them because of that view. I'm more so talking about like their opinion on random things. Like, readers are starting to know writers in a way that they didn't before. And like, maybe that's a good thing because you can see if they align with you, right? But also, it's kind of bridging this gap that I think existed for a good reason. Like, this gap that exists between Suzanne Collins and her readership, where Suzanne Collins feels like this like very different, like very separate entity from her fan base. And that's not to say that she's not like supportive and nice and loves her fans, but it's not like she's best friends with her fans, So I think it's just an interesting place we found ourselves in, and I'm trying to figure out where I fall on that. I feel like I haven't actually said anything in the last 10 minutes, but I'm trying to figure out where I fall on that, because hopefully in the future I get to be that level. I mean, I don't even need to be that level of fame, but like I get to a point where like people are reading my books who I don't know and who don't know me. But I'm like thinking about, how do I want to create a space that like does help build my readership, because I know that will be part of my responsibility, but also like leaves enough space between me as a person and a writer and my readers, because I don't know, like I think that there should be a little bit of space there, that like a reader space is different than a writer space. And like you can occupy both of them, but I think the more that you occupy both of them, the harder it gets. Because then it's like, if I'm a writer and I'm in reader spaces all the time, then they have so much more influence over me and my creativity. And it's like, yes, you want to write what your readers want, but also you have to, like, the reason they read your books is because they like your actual writing and your actual ideas. So if you start to cater to your readership in that way, it just can get dangerous, I feel like. Like, I think about Doctor Who, and I'm not going to go into a whole Doctor Who thing about this right now, okay? Recently, I think Doctor Who has gotten worse, and I think it's because there's a lot of fan service happening. Because they are so close to their fans now, because of social media, and people who were fans of the show are now working on the show, which I mean has always kind of existed, but like because of that, there loses some of the like the true creative spirit of it, because you're always thinking about that reader voice or that audience voice who is now so much more vocal. I mean, that reader voice has always been there, and so has the viewer voice, but like because it's so much more vocal and because it's in the room with you now, like once you invite readers into your writing, I feel like it changes it. And I haven't even had that experience yet, but that's just kind of what my thoughts are. I'm really curious like what you guys think about that. Like, should writers and readers be in different spaces? And I mean, like, obviously we're like, what spaces are you talking about? All this, like the internet? Like, we're all on the internet. Like, don't be silly and ridiculous, you know? More so, like, should a writer be in contact with their readers? Not even just like, should readers and writers be in different spaces, but should readers of a writer be in the same space as the writer? And I, like, the answer is, like, Alyssa, that's how it has to be, because that's, like, if you want people to read your book, you have to tell them about your book. You know, like, we're not in that era anymore where they're, like, every book just gets crazy marketing, which I don't know if that ever happened, truly. But, like, how do we navigate that as creatives? Like, how do we navigate and make clear, like, boundaries with our audience? Because, I mean, I hope all of you are my future readers, and I feel like we're friends, but I don't want you to be in my head when I'm writing. Or I don't want to be worried that, like, every random opinion, like, do I like Peeta or Gale, is going to send, like, a hate train towards me. And then people are going to, like, not read my books anymore because of that, because they know too many random, unimportant details. Like, I think it's nice to know important details about people so that, like, if you have a hard line that, you know, they don't cross it. You don't need to know your favorite author's favorite type, if they're a vegetarian or not. I don't know. I feel like I'm making 8 different points. It's like point salad. Like, none of them are really aligning together, but that's how I feel about that. Thought I would have made more progress on this note by now. Kind of forgot I was making it. Do you want a writing update? I feel like I don't even know what I'm even... I don't expect, like, me to have, like, really thesisized opinions. Obviously, you can tell from the word soup I just spouted out for the last 23 minutes that, like, I rarely have, like, a yes or a no or a hard, like, line about writing rules and spaces and ideas, because everybody works a little bit differently and everybody's creativity works differently. So don't come here expecting, like, what does Alyssa think concretely about everything? It's more so a place for me to explore writing ideas with people who I know get it, who are all of you. I mean, there are certain things like generative AI. I feel very strongly that, like, that has no space, has no place in the creative process. Period, point blank, done. But there are very few, like, opinions like that I hold. I think, like, life is just too nuanced for that and too complicated for that in most situations. Obviously, there are hard lines. Writing update, it's going good. I will talk about this in a vlog, I'm sure, so I won't beat the dead horse to death, but I'm excited to be getting back into more of a regular routine. I've talked about, like, this transition into this new book has been difficult, just because of, like, anxiety, but also because of it's just hard to transition out of something you've been working on for so long, and, like, feeling also this, like, dread building that comes with querying. Like, when you're actively querying, I feel like you live in a state of dread, because, like, every rejection could be a confirmation that, like, the book is bad. But it also could be nothing. Like, it could be just like, oh, this wasn't right for me. But you can't tell the difference between this wasn't right for me and this is terrible. And so it's just, like, builds this growing dread. And I have a full out right now, which I guess I'm sharing. And I am, like, really delusional about it, I have been checking Query Tracker. It's literally open at my feet right now, Query Tracker, because it's just consuming everything. And it's this dread of like, I've had so many fulls turn into no's at this point that I'm like, it's hard to even be hopeful about the full, because it's like, I don't want to go through the like convincing myself I have an offer coming and then it's not, and then feeling like it needs to mean all these things about me, when in reality, a full getting a rejection could mean so many things. It could literally just mean, oh, I have a client, she's similar. Or it could mean like the writing is fine, it's good, but it's not amazing. Maybe there's something glaringly wrong that I can't see, but they're not going to tell me that. That's the annoying thing, is they never actually tell you what's actually wrong with the book. And that could mean that there is nothing tangibly wrong, it just wasn't for them. But it also could mean like, Alyssa, you have a giant plot hole that you need to deal with that nobody told me about, you know? Which I don't think is the case, but because it's the first full that's out, I'm just very like, ooh, I am gonna pee my pants. I'm so stressed about it all the time. Like I'm just, and it doesn't help. This person is somebody who responds very quickly on fulls, and they're taking longer than they typically do. And also they just offered to someone else yesterday. And so I'm like really losing hope that it's gonna be a yes. But also she keeps requesting from people even after offering. So I'm like, girl. But also I looked at her offer history on Query Tracker, and like she does sometimes offer to multiple people within a couple of weeks. So it's not like that offer means I won't get one, but I'm trying to like convince myself that even if it's a no, I might get something useful out of it, because it's the first full. Like maybe I'll learn that there is something wrong, or that maybe it'll be like, this was so close, you're amazing, you know? But waiting on that while still getting form rejections coming in, it's really rough. So I guess this was less of a writing update and more of a querying update, but that's how it's going. The writing, though, is feeling much better. I've been doing this thing where, like, right when I get home, I write for 30 minutes while my food is cooking, and that has been going well. I'm still in the outline stage. I still haven't really drafted much, but I've been thinking a lot recently about changing your mind. I have for a long time, like, built a routine and a life where I know I've decided what I'm doing and prioritizing, and I'm not changing that. And like, even if it's hard, I'm sticking to it, you know? And I feel like that kind of attitude has served me well, because if I start to make decisions like based on like, oh, I'm feeling tired, so I'm not going to write today, you know, just generally overall in my life, I've tended to not make decisions based off of that. And I'll decide like, no, this is the plot. I'm going to write it out and execute the plot like this. And then I'm going to evaluate and see if it needs to change. But I'm not going to go changing things as I write, because I won't, like, I want to see it fully for what it is before I do that, right? Or deciding like, I'm going to do trad pub. And this is like, I'm deciding to do this. And even when my feelings around it change, like trusting my past self and knowing that the decision I've made is a good one. But recently, that was a bad example to end on, because I'm still doing trad pub. Like, I haven't changed my mind about that. But I've recently just been thinking about like, when things change in our life, it makes sense to try and either cling to the way things were in the past, or like fully change everything. But I've been kind of finding this balance recently, because if you've been around here, you know, like my last video just talking about things changing for me with my anxiety and like how that's impacting my creativity. And like, I feel like I'd been making all of these changes. Like, I've been changing my mind about a lot of things because of that. And just hear me out, okay? Like, I started thinking like, oh, I shouldn't try to write every day because that might be stressful. I shouldn't try and set super high word count goals or go overboard on certain things. Like, I had just decided that with like, I was like, okay, I'm having this change in my mental health. Like, I need to really like cater my whole life around this. And again, I'm not a mental health professional. I think you all knew that. But the other day, kind of thinking about this, and I've had a few times over the last week or so where I just kind of did what I used to do. Like, I did my 6 a.m. streams like I used to. Like, yes, I was like, oh, I might feel anxiety, but I'm just going to do it anyway, you know? And I stopped catering to that. I had put in my head that like, oh, if I try to be really disciplined, if I try to do all these things, like, it's all going to fall apart. Like, I need to rest because I can't handle it. But I kind of am thinking now, yes, it's good to change your mind about the way you do things if things are impacting you in your life, but also some things do still work. I had changed my mind about being disciplined in the same way, where it was like, no, I write every day and I write this amount of hours and I get through this amount of stuff and I do it. You know, I kind of changed my thinking about that. But I think that actually did me a disservice, because there was a period of time where I did need to take a break. And then I took the break, and then I just kept taking the break from the discipline. And the second I brought back even like an inkling of that, like doing 6 a.m. streams or having like a schedule where I write at a certain time when I get home every day, like doing those kind of things, like I was able to do that, and it did work the same way. Like it kind of brought me back to that headspace that I've been trying to get into of getting things done and working on the book. It became easier to ignore the anxiety, because I was like, no, that's not what I'm working on right now. I don't need to think about that right now. I can just work on what I'm actually working on. And I don't know if this would work for everyone or whatever situation you're in, but it kind of goes back to this piece of advice this piece of anti-advice I've given in, I think it was like, I've written a video that was like, I've written 6 books or 5 books or whatever, here's what I've learned. And the advice is that people suggest taking breaks too much. And you might be thinking to yourself, Alyssa, what are you even saying at this point? I really think there's a difference between like truly needing an energy break and using that as an excuse or as a crutch to not move forward. Like, I think I was afraid of getting back into discipline because I was afraid it wasn't going to feel the same, or I was afraid it wasn't going to work, or that my anxiety would get worse, or whatever, you know? And then I did it, and I was like, oh, that actually wasn't that bad, and I actually can get back to that feeling. And it was a moment where, like, before I did that, I was like, okay, well, screw it. I'm having anxiety either way. Like, I can either have this and still do what I love and still make progress in things that I'm doing, or I can just stew. And it's so easy to say that in a moment where I'm, like, rational and not having a moment, you know? Like, when I'm in the throes of anxiety, it's a lot more difficult to get to that point. I just kind of had that moment with myself where I was like, okay, what if I just tried? Some days it's easier than others, and I still give myself a lot of grace, and I've still built in like a lot of rest and like things that are good for me and good for my anxiety. And like I have built those things into my life as well to make sure that I'm not falling into destructive patterns. But I also have been trying to like re-embrace the discipline and the like get it done girl boss mentality, which I don't know, a lot of people I feel like might be split on this, because I get a lot of comments when I talk about this of like, you're doing too much, you're spreading yourself too thin. But the thing about it is, I think people operate differently. Like, some people thrive when they're busy and getting things done, and some people thrive when they have a slower lifestyle. And obviously, even if you thrive with a busy life, you still need time to refill the creative well and to do all of these things. But I have learned that I do better when I'm in a routine where I'm getting things done every day and I'm making consistent progress, because it gives my brain something to think about. It gives me space to like really be in my creativity. It lets my brain know like what we're doing. Like it gives my body and my mind this sense of security of like, oh yeah, I know how to write at 6 a.m. when I make myself do it. And all of this is so much easier said than done. But when I decided to change my mind back to, I'm going to do this, like I'm going to work hard, make progress, and set goals that are really serious again, and I changed my mind back to that, I don't know, it's been really helpful for me in a lot of ways. Again, this is not medical advice. This is just me like kind of working through this adjustment and change. And you'll notice on the topic of changing your mind about how you do things, like this is a different tune than I was singing a week ago. And it might be a different tune than what I'm singing next week. It has been helpful to get the reminder that the things that have always worked sometimes still do work. Writing with the routine and having word count goals and writing in the morning and all these things, and going on walks and drinking a lot of water. Like, there are things that you know are just good for your body and your mind. I don't think there's anyone out there who would tell you that going on a walk is bad for you. Like, going on a walk outside does so many things, and I know that, and so I use that as a tool. And so I think I'm just adding a lot of these routines and like making goals and having habits, doing challenges as tools that do help me bring myself out of maybe a spiral or a moment of spiral. That is kind of a shift for me, as I for a while was like, no routine, like just like listen to my body, which is good. I'm not telling you to not listen to your body, don't get me wrong, but also adding those as tools rather than like, because I was thinking of them as like, oh, being in that kind of routine and doing really strict writing goals, like that is going to be too much pressure. And I took them from the category of being pressure to being things that actually help my nervous system and my mind. Like I've moved those things from the pressure category to the tool category, because I have consistently seen that doing things like that, talking to people, getting coffee with, writing in the morning, doing live streams, like these things do help me, even though I might feel at times like they won't. What I've noticed, and this might not be true for everyone, but I think it probably is that like anxiety will lie to you. It will tell you that like, oh, breathing deeply won't work. Whereas like, I know that it will. Like logically, factually, it will. And so it's easy when it feels like, oh, breathing deeply won't help. My brain is like, no, Alyssa, it obviously will. That's obvious. But when you take it, it's very common knowledge to me that deep breathing works well, or going on a walk. So if my brain is saying, no, we shouldn't go on a walk, like I can identify that that's the anxiety talking and not my rational brain. But when it comes to things like routines and goals and like all these things I've been talking about, it's harder to tell, is that anxiety telling me like, no, we shouldn't do routines, that won't help, Alyssa, when it actually will help. It's more difficult to identify, but now I'm kind of identifying that with myself of like, no, if you follow a routine, it will work and it will help. I'm just kind of getting back into that. And I don't want people to get me wrong of I'm building into those routines time to like go on walks and write by hand fan fiction and do puzzles and like relax, and I am building that in as well. But writing for 2 hours, that's like a small, if you think about how much you do during the day, like writing for 2 hours or 1 hour, you can get a lot done and it doesn't eat up all this time. It's not like I'm gonna say like, oh, now I have to write for 10 hours every day. Like that's obviously not what I'm doing. I don't know, I was at the doctor today and I was getting like it was like an x-ray of my throat, because that's where a lot of I'm totally fine, but that there was just something that like they were getting checked on. And it's related to my anxiety, but it's all good. Everything's good. I was so nervous about it going in, and when I was sitting in the waiting room, waiting for the like radiology people to come and get me, I realized that like everybody in the room with me is older, probably 70s, and I'm listening to them check in, and they're here for a PET scan. They're here to check on their like cancer, to check on these like really debilitating things that come later in life. And I was just sitting there like kind of crashing out about like, oh no, I'm gonna have to do all these things that I know will give me anxiety with doctors, but it'll be fine. But like I was just kind of trying to manage that, and I just like had this realization of, yes, what I'm going through is valid, and yes, these feelings are valid, but also I could be sitting in this room for such a worse reason. And that doesn't diminish what this has done for me, you know, like how it's impacted me. But it did give me this perspective of like, I have so much life to live. I have so much that I can still do even with this happening. And like, I'm going to take advantage of that and actually really like live the way I know I want to live. Like by spending time doing my creative things and making progress in my passions and being present to the people around me. And sometimes the anxiety makes that difficult, but it was kind of I don't want to say wake up call because that's like super cliche or whatever, but it really was for a reason that really inhibited me from like doing all these things. And I'm not, and that I should like, it's a reminder of like all the things I still can do. And it kind of helped me like shut down the anxious spiral, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna go into this room and swallow all these things under an x-ray, and then I'm gonna be able to go home or go to work and write a chapter of my book and go and see people and talk to a camera about my life and do all these things anyway. And there's a lot of people who can't go and do that after a radiology appointment or after a doctor's appointment. And it was kind of a kick in the pants of like, no, I still can do everything. And it will be more difficult sometimes, and that's okay. And I can manage that. And I'm not going to let it impact my life so much, you know? I mean, it will still impact my life. Like, that's such a lie. But impact my, like, my goals. Or shut them down. It will impact them regardless. But to, like, shut them down. Yeah. I think that's going to be all for this video. Thank you so much for being here. Let me know if you like this style of like sit down and chat and like we're just hanging out sort of vibes podcasty moment. I'm probably going to do more of these. So if there's any topics that you want to hear my like indecisive thoughts about, because I feel like that's what this whole video is like me just talking through different writing sort of adjacent related things and then never actually coming to like a definite conclusion, but just kind of exploring those thoughts. Let me know if you have any topics that I can cover in that way for you. Thank you for being here. Let me know your thoughts on anything that I talked about today, especially about like what an author's relationship should be with their readers, or like what you would want your relationship to be with your readers, because there's no like should be. It's just like I think it's an interesting thought experiment of like, how do I want to be connected to my readers? What do I want them to know about me? And let me know what you've changed your mind about recently. Oh my gosh. I'll see you so soon. I just gotta finish this row. Okay. I finished one project and then this is a new one. Okay.
Bye.